What's going on, everyone? Set 6 is rapidly approaching, and that means we get to play with all the new cards. And I want to talk about kind of my first impressions and some of the best cards of the set. Now, I know a lot of us have already talked about kind of the power level of the set and how it looks like it's definitely lower than something like Secrets of Power, but that does not mean that there are not cards that are extremely exciting and could have some major meta impact. So we got to dive into the top 10 ones that are kind of on my radar. There are definitely some other cards out there outside of the top 10 that are interesting and maybe could be worth an honorable mention. And of course, this is just my preliminary testing. So I'm excited to see what everyone else's initial impressions of some of these cards are in their testing. That said, a huge thank you to my patrons over on Patreon, guys. It's a really amazing thing that everyone is able to support the channel as they do. So thank you. And let's dive into our first one. All right, and for our first one, we've got Imperial Dark Trooper. Got to start off with the best of them all. A 2-cost ground unit in command villainy. It's a 3/3. It's got the Imperial, Droid, and Trooper tags. So obviously you look at this card and you're like, okay. But if you looked at my previous list from Legends of the Force, you would have known that I also included a lot of 2 resource plays that were just solid. Something like Secretive Sage is in my top 10 list. And well, yeah, we see how powerful Secretive Sage is. It's just for the matter of setting up and having another turn 1 play that is excellent. And we've seen how impactful something like Battlefield Marine has been over the course of time. It's been in the meta since set 1. And I think Imperial Dark Trooper, although it doesn't fit as many decks, since Battlefield Marine's in the Heroism Rebel synergy package, which is incredibly amazing, I think this is a card that's going to see at least a decent amount of play just because it's a solid turn 1 play. There are a lot of command villainy decks out there that could really use just a 3/3 on turn 1 instead of playing something like a Yularen that gets killed by a Sabine, right? This is just a card that's going to be universally decent. And that's good enough to be something that's pretty exciting in the meta. It also has the droid tag for, you red shenanigans or any other droid shenanigans, and the Imperial tag for the Tarkin shenanigans or anything else that cares about the Imperial cards. It does have the villainy aspect, which is really important for things like Vader, right? So you can have another 2 resource play for Vader when it comes down as another option. This just kind of ticks a lot of boxes. And because it's so cheap, it has a really solid chance of being one of the better cards to be played in the rest of the meta. Next one up, we've got one of the more exciting plot cards from the new set. We've got a 5-cost ground unit in Cad Bane in Vigilance Villainy. He's a 4/5 with the Underworld and Bounty Hunter tags. He has plot, and just as a reminder, you could deploy or you could play this card when you deploy a leader, paying its cost. This basically allows you to kind of cheat an action. Now, it's only able to be played from your resources, and then of course you replace the top card or your card in your resource pile with the top card of your deck. So the idea here is you kind of get this draw card in essence. You put this down in your resources. When you deploy your leader, you get a free play, and you get to action cheat by just deploying multiple cards and using all your resources in one fell swoop. This also has when play, when you defeat a unit, or when you play it, you may defeat a unit with 2 or less remaining HP. Kind of like the Devastating Gunship, but instead of being a 3/5 with grit for 5 in the space arena, this one has the 4/5 stat line in the ground arena, which is oftentimes a little bit more relevant. And then it basically allows you to draw a card because you're playing it from your resource pile. Now, you can just play this as a unit, and it's reasonable, nothing too exciting. But the cards I'm excited about for Cad Bane are something like a Kira deck, where you deploy Kira, you get to go ahead and trigger the Kira effect, play Cad Bane, and then knock out something. That's the same thing that Devastating Gunship used to do. However, this time you could do it in one action. So you could actually clear out, let's say, a ground unit that might threaten Kira with this Cad Bane Kira kind of 1/2, which I think is pretty interesting. Also, other decks, just kind of standard mid-range controlling decks. If you're playing like a Jabba that deploys on 5 resources, or a Villainy Vigilance Command deck that deploys on 5 resources, something like Piet. Maybe you are playing Cad Bane in there as just another value piece, right? There's just some decks that are going to be playing this just as a solid value piece attached to their arsenal already. And it's not like something you have to play a full 3 of to get the value of, because you could just play 1 or 2. And if you happen to get them, you resource them. And then when your leader does come down, maybe it's a spot for it and maybe it's not. the plot aspect of this makes this a lot more powerful of a card. All right, the next one up we've got is Kazuda Xiono. And besides me not being able to watch this show because I don't know, I just can't get through the style of it, I guess. We've got a 4-cost ground unit in Aggression Heroism. It's a 2/6 resistance unit with Raid 2. And the most important part, while you control fewer resources than an opponent, this unit gets +2/+0. So at first glance, you're like, ooh, it's a 2/6 for 4 with Raid 2. I mean, I guess that's playable, right? It's solid. Honestly, a 2/6 for 4 isn't bad with Raid 2. I mean, that does do a decent amount of damage, and it's going to be on par with a lot of the Aggression Heroism units that you have. I think the biggest thing holding Kazuda back is the fact that it doesn't have a Rebel tag for some of the decks. But this other clause of being able to get +2/+0 while you control fewer resources is really important, actually. When you deploy this guy, there's a lot of decks out there that are going to be resupplying. There's going to be a lot of decks that are going to be playing Super Laser Technician. And that's where you see Kazuda really get strength. Because those decks are also decks that are probably not going to be dealing with these units with direct damage. And the way this guy is statted as a 4/6 means that you can't get Takedown and you can't get Fell the Dragon. And so that's kind of what shifted me to really start to like Kazuda a lot more. So initially I was like, I don't know if he's really going to be fitting all that well. Like, do I want to be playing this over K2 or something like that in Aggression Heroism? And it turns out that, yeah, it fits really nicely on the curve. Perhaps this is more of like a sideboard option, like a couple more copies in your sideboard and you think 1 or 2 of in your main board for the decks that truly are ramping. Because if they're not ramping, it's just an okay play. Yes, the 6th office can matter for some decks. So, you know, a 2/6 with the Raid 2 can be decent even in just its base state. But the real powerful strength is you get a 4/6 that essentially attacks for 6 as a 4-cost unit that avoids every one of the common removal options in terms of Fell the Dragon and Takedown. Yes, it still gets hit by Rival's Fall, but so does everything. Yes, it still gets Power of the Dark Side after it's only on the battlefield. But again, that's just something that everything's going to get hit by. So I'm not really counting that against Kazuda. I just really think the stat line and the fact that you can get a 6-powered attacker potentially if your opponent is ramping can put a ton of pressure on your opponent. And it's overall just been a really solid addition. Probably the most impressive plot card for me so far is Chancellor Palpatine. 3-cost ground unit in Command Villainy. It's a 2/2. So if you're playing this as a 3-resource 2/2, you're pretty sad. But it has plot, and it says when played, if you control a leader unit, you create 2 spy tokens and give those tokens Sentinel for this phase. So really, the power level of this guy is that you come down and you create a 2/2 and then 2 0/2s. So you get essentially 3 resources for 2 power and 6 toughness worth of stats. You get 2 Sentinels, which can be really, really nice in stalling damage. But those 2 0/2s also have Raid 2. So you get 3 resources for almost 6 power and 6 toughness in a lot of situations, which is really, really a lot. Okay. And it's one single action. One of the biggest problems with go wide decks is that it requires way too many actions all the time. Now, yes, this still requires actions to attack with those spy tokens. But the important part is you play your leader, you get to deploy the Chancellor, you get 3 bodies automatically, and 2 of those bodies are going to immediately have Sentinel to probably impact the board in some way. And even if one of them immediately dies and doesn't really create any value, it's basically like a 3-resource 2/2 that also created a 0/2 that also healed you 3-4 damage or whatever it was, which is still really good. So this actually does do really well in some of the more, not like necessarily aggressive, but mid-range / more aggressive decks that when you're deploying your leader, you know, things like Lauren or decks that are playing, you know, Gar ECL, for example. I've tried a little bit of Chancellor Palpatine in, you know, decks that are just able to get a little bit of value out of Palpatine could do some work. If your leader deploys 5-6 resources, getting this guy down and just creating a bunch of bodies can do some cool things. Now, you do need a leader unit, which is its biggest downside. Basically, you play this guy for plot or you don't play him at all, which is one of the, I guess you'd say, biggest downsides with Chancellor Palpatine. When this guy pops off in terms of playing your leader, playing this guy using plot, it is impressive most of the time. Out of that, you got nothing. You got a 3-resource 2/2. So that's the fail case. Just think of this guy as I'm only ever resourcing it. I'm only ever playing it when that is the case. Yes, you could play a secondary copy when this one dies, or even if it doesn't, if your leader is still out. But there's no guarantee that that's the case. after you've already played your first Palpatine. You don't necessarily have to play this guy from plot in order to get the value, because you can control a leader unit and just play him. But most of the time, it's only because you have your leader deployed and you're playing Palpatine from the plot that this guy is truly, truly powerful. Next up, we've got one of the most intriguing events from the set, and this is Aggressive Negotiations. This is a 3-cost event in aggression. It's attack with a unit. For this attack, it gets +1/+0 for each card in your hand. I'll tell you guys, when I first started, playing around with the new cards in the set, this one slipped under my radar in terms of, I don't think I ever actually reviewed it a ton. I think I may have glanced over, or maybe it just wasn't part of kind of one of the videos I did. But I remember playing a couple games, what the heck did I just get hit by? They're in aggression command. How do they just get in for a ton of damage? It's this Aggressive Negotiation. This thing has everything that you want, right? It's relatively cheap. It has the attack with a unit, so it's not like pump and then you have to attack. It does it in one action, and it has a really powerful amount of power attached to it. The immediate thought is if you play this, let's just say in one of the normal decks that we're already seeing, like Han Blue, for example, right? Or even Anakin Blue. You have Ki-Adi-Mundis in that deck. There's very likely to have 4 or 5 cards in your hand in the mid game. When you deploy the Aggressive Negotiations, this is a 3-resource attack, and you get +4/+0 or +5/+0. I mean, that is incredible. Even +3/+0 is kind of interesting, just because it's not in aggression already. I mean, we see how universally amazing Surprise Strike is. Basically, you're playing a cunning deck. You're playing a 3 of Surprise Strike in that deck in the majority of cases. So Aggressive Negotiations is a very, very interesting addition. Now, of course, you can't play it in Double Red Kylo because it's useless. I tried. Trust me, I tried. But that said, it still does some amazing things in other decks that are somewhat more of that mid-range style, where they do have cards that draw them more cards. Or they do have the Ki-Adi-Mundis of the world, and being able to refill your hand and get the nice amount of cards that you need. And even if you don't have that type of stuff, having 2 or 3 cards in your hand is very, very likely. +2/+0 or +3/+0 would be very, very likely, especially in a set that has plot. Remember, if we're playing these plot cards, that is another card that we're not playing from our hand, and instead of playing from a resource, which also kind of goes into the Aggressive Negotiations powerhouse. So really, really like this card. And again, it can surprise people. I'm sure this is going to get a lot of people at the beginning of the set. They're like, yeah, they're playing aggression. They don't have cunning in their deck. They're not going to be able to attack and pump. And then you just get smacked by, a Poe Dameron that hits you for 12 and then +2 damage because of, the stupid 2 damage from Poe Dameron, and it's attack for 14. You're like, oh my gosh, what just happened, right? Next up, we've got Queen Amidala. Now, guys, if you watched my legendary tier list video, you guys already know where I've placed her, but spoiler alert, she was the #1 legendary in the set, in my opinion, at least. I've played a good amount with her so far, and again, just in my preliminary tests, Queen Amidala has been pretty solid. We've got a 5-cost ground unit in Command Heroism. It's a 5/3. It says, when played, you create 2 spy tokens, and if damage will be dealt to this unit, you may defeat another friendly unit that shares a trait with this unit if you do prevent that damage. So the idea here is you create these 2 spy tokens, and you have this 5/3 that's absorbing all this damage. Now, this could be really powerful against a lot of different decks. If you think about the open fire deck type of decks, or decks that rely on these damaging based abilities, or even just attacking this unit, it's going to be really tough for your opponent to kill this, because you have to kill 2 other units alongside Queen Amidala. And if you have another official unit or another Naboo unit, it could be even more units to keep Queen Amidala alive. And remember, this is only damage, so it's not going to get around takedowns and stuff. But even in situations where you are playing against more controlling decks, you've just created 3 bodies. Similar to Chancellor Palpatine, you get 5/3 of stats in Queen Amidala herself. Then you get 2 0/2s with Raid 2. So if you count those on attacks, you get a total of 9 power and 7 toughness for 5 resources and a relevant ability that keeps her alive. This is just one of those universally solid, just kind of catch-all type of cards where you just play her, solid in a lot of matchups, and then in the spots that it's not, you just resource her and move on. But this is just really, really obnoxious for some decks to deal with. Some decks just cannot deal with this type of card. And the decks that are more controlling are going to have a rude awakening if they're not prepared for this type of stuff, right? I mean, even something like Overwhelming Barrage doesn't finish this off, because you can always just, well, in theory, have enough units to where your opponent needs 7 total damage for William Lodge to finish this off, right? That's a lot of damage. So it's going to be very, very interesting to see how good these like go white type of effects are in the larger meta. Like I said, I've only done preliminary tests. I've tested a little bit against the meta itself and what we think will be the meta and stuff like that, but it won't showcase itself truly until we get to some of those big tournaments. And I'm really, really curious to see if cards like this are really going to be powerful. It's one of those things where when I come from Magic, cards like Queen Amidala are an immediate like, dang, this looks good, because you get multiple bodies, you spread your value across multiple units. The big difference between that game and this game is that you can attack units in this game, right? So that does make it a little bit weaker. Typically, you have to create more actions, but I think this is one of those ones that's really good because it fits in a combination of aspects that tends to be a little bit more aggressive or potentially in the mid-range style of things, which this can do some work there as well. Talk about a unit that has been on a lot of people's radar since the first reveal. I was super high on Cinta, and I still am pretty high on Cinta Kaz here. We got a 6-cost ground unit in aggression. She's a 5/5 rebel. She's got, when played, you may attack with a unit, and she has plot. It's pretty straightforward. She's kind of like your, I don't want to say Fleet Lieutenant, because Fleet Lieutenant also gives you +2/+0, but she's kind of like your big version of that effect, where you deploy your leader, you get an immediate usage of all 6 of your resources, you get a 5/5 body, right? So because of the plot mechanic, you essentially get to draw a card because you're using it from your resources. And most importantly, you get an immediate attack with whatever leader you have. This could be a big problem for some decks. Take, for example, let's just say you're playing like Vader Red, like the Pilot Vader. Again, Vader Yellow has been the more popular one, but I've seen some people kind of diving into Vader Red, because if you go like Clone Combat Squadron, one of the biggest things here, you don't want to deploy onto Clone Combat Squadron because, well, that puts all your eggs in that Clone Combat Squadron basket. But I've seen people play their Vader Reds, get a bunch of units down, get their Clone Combat Squadron down on turn 4 rather than turn 3, and then deploy Vader, immediately get an attack in with Cinta Kaz, and that's like an attack for 15 or something, ridiculous, because you usually get a lot of space units. Even if it's not, it's like 9 or 10 at the minimum. And then you get a 5/5, you got your big attack, and your opponent has to deal with all that, and it just takes one action, right? And the same thing applies to any other unit. I've seen a lot of pilots really, really work well with this, like the Luke Skywalker from Jump to Lightspeed. You get to like pilot that guy on like a red 5, for example, get the double trigger on the damage unit and the 3 damage from Luke. You get the deploy onto that unit, and then you get the 5/5 alongside it. I've also tried to play around with it like Qui-Gon Red, where you get to bounce the Cinta, so you get to go Qui-Gon deploy, attack with Qui-Gon, bounce Cinta, replay or play out like a Plo Koon, and then you get like Qui-Gon's attack. You get to use all 6 of your resources. You get an ambush out of it. I mean, there are some really, really amazing things you can do with this card. But overall, I mean, just being able to immediately attack with whatever leader you have. I can see this being played in like Anakin decks, even, where you have this big, huge leader, but you can't get an attack in with it always. And, one of the biggest things is if you are playing into a more aggressive deck, this is a great way to utilize all your resources immediately and get value out of maybe a later to deploy leader like Anakin, where you may be taking a little bit of damage on your base, but you deploy Anakin, get the Cinta, attack with Anakin, kill a unit, get some damage on their base, you get a 5/5 leftovers, you use all your resources, you can immediately claim initiative and set up for the next turn, and provide multiple bodies to the board, and make sure that Anakin gets value. This card just seems like it's going to do some work in a lot of different decks. And to top it all off, it's got the Rebel tag. So if you do have like Rebel Assault or Wing Leader or Fleet Lieutenant, you could Fleet Lieutenant Cinta on the following turn if that is something that's, worth the cause, I suppose. And of course, if you're playing the new Cassian, you get an immediate attack in with Cassian from Cinta, which is awesome as well. Next up, we got Figure of Unity. If you watch my legendary tier list, guys, spoiler alert, just like the Queen Amidala, I put this one fairly high on the list. We got a 3-cost upgrade in Command Heroism. It's attached to a unique unit, and while this unit is ready, you get Overwhelm, Raid 1, and Restore 1 to all your other units, and it's got +2/+2. So the idea here is you attach it to a leader, is kind of the way I think about this. Yes, you can attach it to any unique unit in reality, but oftentimes what happens is you kind of want to get in with those units beforehand, potentially, and so you may not have a ton of value, or maybe you just want to get down a leader, and then you want to have your upgrade survive because it's harder to deal with, which is also kind of the case. So decks like, Sabine, for example, 4 cost deploy, you get the figure of unity down, you get +2/+2 on Sabine. Even if you get one other attack within, that's 3 damage essentially, because you get the +2/+2 and heal 1 for 3 resources. If we think about that, that's very, very close to on par with the Darksaber. And then you got continuous value out of this with, you know, potentially other units on the board or attacking another unit. Like with Overwhelm, you can get through that Sentinel or whatever unit and get in damage to the base and still potentially race a little bit better with the Restore 1s. And then you also have another potential 1 resource to play with like Nemik's Manifesto, for example, which is really, really a solid card as well. But that's not all. There's all sorts of other decks that can kind of fit this. I've seen, you know, a Cassian where they have the initiative and they tend to keep it. You got figure of unity, you just kind of win the game with a readied up Cassian. I mean, there's all sorts of situations because you don't have to apply this to a leader, but it tends to be a little bit stronger. I just think there's a lot of, you know, potential with figure of unity, and you can do some good work with it. So it's just a lot of power. It's a lot of value for a reasonably costed upgrade. On to aggression heroism. Once again, we've got a 2-cost ground unit in Karis Nemik. We've got a 3/2 rebel with hidden. Pretty nice. Hidden always is relevant, especially later on in the game. But also if you're worried about turn 1 ambushers, it can be pretty nice. But later on in the game, this guy just gets a lot better because when you play it, doesn't immediately get killed by some of the bigger units, which might cause some trouble for your opponent. It's got the rebel tag, which is really, really relevant in the aggression heroism category. It's got this when defeated trigger, though, to disclose aggression heroism. And if you do, you create a spy token. And here's the kicker. You get to ready it. Amazing. This card has been amazing. One of the biggest common things that happens in your aggressive deck is you play your turn 1 unit, you attack with it. Cool, your opponent power the dark sides it or whatever. Or maybe you have the initiative. So you turn 1, you kill, you attack their base with like Fleet Lieutenant. You Fleet Lieutenant in Karis, and you get the +2/+, so you get 5 damage to the base. But your opponent has, you know, Imperial Dark Trooper, or maybe a Pike Sentinel, and they attack your Karis. Or maybe they do have Pike Sentinel out, and you attack in with Karis. And guess what? In all of those situations, you get the damage in, or you kill their unit in trade. And then you get a spy token to immediately do 2 damage to their base. Think of it this way. If I had a 2-cost ground unit in a 3/2 with a rebel tag that said, when defeated, deal 2 damage to a base, would I play that? Oh yeah, that would be busted. Like that would be a crazy card to play in a lot of the more aggressive decks. And that tends to be how this works. So I think Karis Nemik is going to be an incredible card for a lot of those more aggressive decks. And like I said, even in the late game, you have multiple things to deal with this guy. Because what's important about it is, let's say your opponent attacks into Karis. You get the next action no matter what, because it dies. And then you disclose. And so your opponent had to have been doing something, assuming you didn't just attack in with Karis, which I guess that's possible. But let's say your opponent attacks into you. You immediately are able to use that spy token. So it's really hard to deal with this guy without immediately getting 2 damage back into whatever unit or whatever base that they have. Yes, they could have a Sentinel to prevent it, but again, those are few and far between since it's an early drop, right? So oftentimes this is your sacrificial lamb for power of the dark side. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've played my more aggressive deck and my opponent's got the turn to power of the dark side, which is normally, you know, just a solid play. And they kill my Sabine normally or my Battlefield Marine, but instead I got my Fleet Lieutenant in for 5 damage and they kill my Karis, and I'm left with a spy token that gets in 2 damage. Now I've dealt 7 damage to their base on turn 2, and I'm left with Fleet Lieutenant, and I still have the 0/2, right? This isn't just like it dies immediately. This can potentially be, when defeated, you create a spy token and deal 6 damage to an opponent's base, right? It's not guaranteed to just do 2. That's what's so incredible about this card. This might be one of the strongest cards in the entire set. I have it on the top list, but it might just be the best in terms of, you know, what the potential of this card could be. I started off with like a 2 of this card. I just immediately go into 3 of, and I'm playing aggression heroism deck. It's just, it is what it is. It has the rebel tag too. It's got everything you possibly could want from a turn 1 play in your aggression heroism deck. And lastly, I thought about a lot of cards in this last slot, but I decided to go with Condemn. 3-cost upgrade in Vigilance Villainy. While attached unit is attacking, it gains on attack. The defending player may disclose Vigilance Villainy. If they do, this unit gets -6, -0 for this attack and loses all other abilities. So essentially, you just make that unit completely worthless. It loses all other abilities. It doesn't lose traits, so if they want to generate with force, I suppose Condemn doesn't prevent that. But they're not going to get any ability triggers, and they're not going to get any damage into your base. This is kind of like my dark horse if the more controlling decks are solid. And this has to be like a very hard control deck generally, because obviously this is going to mess up your power of the dark sides and things like that. But if you get to like super laser blast resources and things like that, this neuters Podamerons, right? And normally Podamerons are tough to take out. Like you need to Fell the Dragon or Power the Dark Side or like a Rival's Fall. This is another 3 resource option to do so. And you can, apply this to a lot of different units. Maybe they have some sort of ability that is extremely powerful on attack, but you don't have a way to immediately kill it. This can just kind of neuter it. That's kind of the idea behind it. It's just another removal option for very, very cheap that help you stall into the later stages of the game. And we know how powerful those can be, especially in the Command Vigilance Villainy archetype. I mean, just think about this in like the Kylo Ren decks, right? You have an upgrade that you can discard to potentially filter for Kylo Ren. And yes, you're not going to be able to like get it back from the discard pile, but you can play this in the early game. And if it's bad, you just discard it, filter your deck. Cool. No problems whatsoever. This is like the Perilous Position, but better. In some cases, and in some cases it's worse, right? Because Perilous Position can hit anything for exhaust purposes. But remember, this also can affect leaders. So what's interesting about this, and this is one of the things that I really liked about Condemn, and the reason why I put it on my list, because all those things before, yes, that makes it a powerful card, but there's also some other powerful cards out there. You can apply this to leaders. So this basically is like kill a leader, but then don't give them their leader ability back in a lot of cases, right? Now, maybe they have some of their ability that doesn't require on attacks, but just think about like Sabine, for example. 4 resource Sabine. Oh, they put a Darksaber on it? Well, I'll just put Condemn on it. Darksaber's gone. They can't get Sabine to flip back, and now they're left with a 0/8, I guess, that doesn't do anything, and they don't get to deal 1 damage to me every single round when I kill, or if I were to kill Sabine. That could heal you, essentially. This could have been a kill Sabine, heal 4, right? Heal 5, heal 6, or whatever, how long the game is going to take. So, I mean, there's some really, really powerful things that Condemn can do, and that's the exciting part about it. Now, you do have to have Vigilance and Villainy in your hand to make this truly strong. However, if you're playing a Command Vigilance Villainy deck, you're going to have that 99% of the time, assuming you're playing around Condemn, which you would be. So I think this is going to get the number 10 spot for me. And that's going to wrap up our list. Like I said, there's a lot of other cards that could be, exchanged out onto this list as a top 10 option. If there's a card on here that I did not mention, let me know in the comment section down below and why you think it should have been on the top 10. Have you had a good experience with it? Have you just gotten absolutely dominated by it? That's usually my experience, is like either I load up a game and I try out a card, I'm like, dang, this is crushing. And then also at the same token, I'm loading up some games and there's just this guy that just played this new card and I'm like, dang, that just absolutely dominated me. Like that card won the game for them. And then I run it back with that card to try it out myself. So as per usual, the testing's always been a lot of fun. This is the top 10 for me for Secrets of Power. I was going to say Secrets of Force, but Secrets of Power. Hopefully you all will enjoy the new set, because it's not actually out yet for some of you. I have been a ton, and I cannot wait to dive into some more games when the set's fully released, and I'll see you guys then.